The growing deficit, I think, is a concern. But one of my bigger concerns, Izabella, is trying to commute. I see all of this, right? I just do this day to day. The people I talk to on my podcast, or the people I talk to on Twitter, are all talking about this. I try and reach out to the circles of friends and explain to them. I put out I don't know if you saw the letter about the coordination between the ECB, the Fed, the Bank of England, the BOJ, like how they were all coordinating with these swap lines, which I'm not going to pretend I understand what the hell they are, but they're all coordinating. This letter itself, you could read it and you could, like, even an idiot like me could read that and this doesn't sound good. So I was like, right, I'm going to put this up on Facebook and say, look, just read this. It'll take you about 2 minutes. Just read this. This will give you an understanding that something crazy is going on. Nobody read it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And so...
Really?
Well,
your viewers, readers would care about that.
My friends on Twitter. So Twitter and Facebook are different people. Twitter
so you
is
like
work.
me have two lives.
Yes, I have my Twitter world, which is my professional world, and my Facebook, which is baby
Friends and
pictures
family.
and dogs and football updates.
And most of your friends and family just probably roll their eyes when you say stuff. Is that because that's like for me?
So my Twitter people roll their eyes and think I'm some crazy woke liberal. My Facebook friends think I'm Alex Jones. It's my tweet. It's my pinned tweet. I've this is how, I've got two angry faces, and I try and tread that path really carefully to say, listen, I'm seeing this all here. You should know about this. You know those high interest rates? Well, this is why it happened. You know that high inflation? This is why it happens. But they see it and they complain about it, but they don't want to go to the point of understanding why it's happening. I can't get them to that.
Yeah, I have the same. I do. I mean, most people have busy lives. They have their day jobs and they just don't have the capacity and bandwidth to pay attention to this stuff.
Well, we can go back to journalism though, because I watch the news and interest rates are reported on. I watch Silicon Valley Bank and the banking crisis being reported on the news. But nobody on the mainstream media is talking about the reason Silicon Valley Bank or these banks have got themselves into difficulty is that they were buying yields, and the massive rise in interest rates put those yields on. Nobody's talking about the detail and the stupidity that's happening. Like I heard it on the radio yesterday, some lady explaining about the liquidity crisis. She didn't explain why there was. So it's almost like we're holding back from giving people the truth of what's happening in these situations. And it takes us back to I don't know. I mean, you've worked in these journalistic circles. Why? Why don't we get this form of reporting?
But mainly, okay, so if you are a reporter and you get asked to go on the BBC and to talk about finance and you use any technical term, they will never invite you back because you have to reduce everything to the most simple explanation you can think of. You can't say the word mark to market. It's too complex, and there is a general perception in editorial newsrooms that the vast majority of your readers are not going to get X and Y. You have to put it in very simple terms. And this encourages people to, and usually that would be okay because actually simple, like George Orwell said, simple writing, keep it simple, stupid, actually is really important. But the problem is that, well, let me go back a little bit. If you really understand your topic, really understand it, you can explain it simply. People who don't understand it can't explain it simply, and they can't explain it technically, in a non-simple way either, because they just don't understand it. However, the simplicity allows them to just not bother learning any of it, right? And so you end up just fudging things because there's never a need to delve to the next layer because nobody ever does complex stuff on TV or in print. So everyone's bluffing is what I'm basically getting to because they've never read, a real analyst is going to take 2 or 3 days for them to understand what really went wrong, right? But in this case, I just find it surprising. This was obvious since 2008, 2009, actually 2009, 2010. As soon as they did QE, there were hundreds of papers written about how the exit's going to complicate things and how we're going to manage the exit because really once you expand the balance sheet to go back is really difficult and you have this problem. And it makes sense. Think about it. Usually you raise interest rates and they are a lever that can regulate credit supply in the system. But if you have this huge bond portfolio that's out there because you've expanded the balance sheet, if you raise interest rates, you're also like debasing your bonds, right? That's why you don't go QE. Because the problem with the monetization isn't on the way whilst interest rates are down, it's when you have to like contract, your liquidity. And frankly, if you didn't have a QE like expanded balance sheet, then you could raise rates whilst inflation is going, and it'd be all right because there wouldn't be thousands of underwater bonds.
Yeah, but this goes back to the problem with the political cycle in that the decisions they make have a lag. So you can make a decision in 2008 under it was the
Gordon Brown.
No, I'm thinking in the US it was essentially a crossover from Bush to Obama, wasn't it?
Tim Geithner.
Yeah, so essentially the decisions that made then rescued the economy for those people.
It's not not the problem. It wasn't their problem. Like what happened next?
No, and it pushed the problem onto Trump and now Biden. And now people will want to attack Biden and blame Biden or even blame Trump. But these are successive governments that have made critical errors across the entire spectrum of politics. And so these are institutional issues, not policy issues that you can tie to one specific political ideology.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you make a good point about long-termism because you can't, like, if you're not accountable for your decisions in 10, 15 years' time and they've ruined the economy, like, what's that about? Like, oh, it wasn't me. It is a funny situation if people can, that's the downside of democracy and continuous sort of rotation of your leaders. So there is if it was a lifelong, like the Queen, like, God bless her soul, was a real rock of stability for the UK. And I do think people underappreciate the role she played in global stability. And I do wonder if people have overlooked how destabilizing her death will be, because she was the ultimate neutrality, political force in the world.
And an almost, unimpeachable... how long was she head of state? 80 years? Yeah, almost unimpeachable.
Yes.
I say almost because I think she should have thrown her son under the bus. Chat for another day. But who else could have 80 years without real scandal?
Yeah.
But in my circles, it's not going to be very popular to
defend the Queen,
to defend a monarchy of any kind, an elitist monarchy. And I think the Queen was a fantastic monarch, but I'm not a fan of the monarchy.
I think in the UK system, the fact that the UK obviously has a very underpowered monarch because ultimately Parliament passes all the laws, but she has that capacity to influence. Soft power is what they call it, right? And the UK's soft power had we roll out the red carpet when we want to attract foreign investment or whatever, and it does play a part. And if Charles isn't as neutral as the Queen, that's a problem, because my general thesis, just to bring it back to money, is that the problem we've created as a result of not just Ukraine, like the deneutralization of money started a long time ago, but it's become more acute now because of Ukraine. So there is no neutral asset to price the market. And so we are living increasingly in our own bubble valuations, pretending and that's fine for as long as you don't depend on external, you don't need commodities or anything from outside of your little, zone, and you can pay for things with your own currency. But in a multipolar order, which might be the next phase, that means a massive sort of depreciation of our overall wealth as a Western system. And because, it will be kind of USSR 2.0. And if that's the case, the only optimistic pathway out is through innovation and productivity. And that means entrepreneurs have to really rally together, forge networks, distributed, and I agree with you on that, and find resilience in network-based productive ventures.
Well, look, this show promotes a neutral asset. an uncorruptible asset that hopefully at some point, maybe decades down the line, could be that measuring stick, that could be that neutral measuring stick, like I hope for. I'm not going to spend any time when we've got 7 minutes to go getting into to the where are you with Bitcoin?
I am in a situation where I think Bitcoin plays a role in the new multipolar order. I think most of crypto is crap, but the
I mean, it's all crap.
You can't really replace Bitcoin because it was the first one, and so just from a pure like energy endowment perspective, it is the first one. Nothing can replace it, and therefore it will always have the most. It's got the biggest blockchain, and I think I don't see it as a settlement for retail payments necessarily in the future. I think it can coexist in a landscape of competing national currencies, but be the ultimate settlement token between those different zones.
I think you've just put it better than I ever would. Why do you think the FT still don't take it seriously? And I know you might have to be careful with your words or not even want to answer, but...
Well, I think to some degree, the FT speaks for the establishment.
Okay.
And I think whether wittingly or unwittingly, I would say that there are people who are pro-Bitcoin and crypto in the FT and who are open-minded to it. And I think the whole collapse of like FTX and stuff, they've been all over that. And funnily enough, like it's become a huge story for them, even though like for years people were rolling their eyes about me and Jemima being really obsessed with crypto. They're like, oh God, it's just not a story. It's not as important as traditional finance. But I always approached it from the point of view of you have to scrutinize this stuff. Like it's making very bold claims. I have to, criticize. And I think, a lot of my criticisms have been, were fair and hopefully led to corrective action. And so, but that was my perspective. But I do think, the lockdown changed my view on everything, as you know. And that's when I realized that it makes sense. The system is better off with a neutral asset that can price everything, because without a neutral asset, you have no pricing of anything. Everything is just, there is no, money must be neutral. And there is no neutral money outside of Bitcoin at the moment.
Yeah, not even gold these days.
Gold reaching a new high as we speak, I think.
Is it?
But
Peter Schiff will be happy.
I think so, yeah. But yeah, I think gold is fine, whatever. But if in a digital age, you need a digital gold because you can't compete. Like you wouldn't be able to compete with anyone. Like if you have to settle in gold, like you can't, right?
Yeah, my friend John Pfeffer said to me a long time ago. He said, when we're all flying around in our Millennium Falcons, we're not going to be settling in yellow rocks. We're going to need a digital gold, and Bitcoin is the one. And that always stuck with me.